So
we're live now.
We're live
so
now.
I should say things like, welcome to the latest in Vivo. I'm Greg Jefferson. I'm a Metro editor of the San Antonio Express News. And this is the second of our live 1 hour conversations with San Antonio candidates for mayor. Up today is City Councilman Manny Peláez.
Yeah. Hi.
Welcome.
Nice to see you. Thank you.
Hi. Let's do just a quick bio. So you are an attorney.
Yes.
You are.
I couldn't get into med school, so I had to go to law school. Yeah.
You've been the District 8 City Councilman since 2017. Before that, you may have been Toyota's very first employee, not a line worker, but their general counsel.
I was their in-house counsel. So there's a whole bunch of different titles for in-house counsel, but I was their managing counsel for this market and for Mexico.
Yeah. Okay. And that was around 2003, right when the automaker came to town. Subsequently, you became a Via Metropolitan Transit trustee. You chaired the Brooks Development Authority. But probably the most consequential item on your resume is you spent a lot of years honing your skills in comedy improv.
Oh, yeah, so that's right.
And that probably has helped you in public life more than anything else.
It's true. I was when I was in college at Trinity, I joined an improv troupe called the Crystal Lemmings, and then the local premier improv troupe here in San Antonio called the Oxymorons accepted me into their fold, and I did that for a long time, and it's therapeutic. And it was wonderful.
Helped you a ton.
It does. So, I mean, you get to say things on stage that would otherwise get you canceled everywhere else, but you really do.
And some of that you've actually translated that to City Council. You said some things at City Council that other they get bounced.
But it also, I think, really, and it's a word I'll throw. You and I have talked about before, but I think, when you do comedy, you realize there really are, and there shouldn't be sacred cows, right? And I know that you and I have had conversations about sacred cows in the past, and I think approaching all of policy work and government work and civic work with this idea that everything warrants analysis and that there's nothing so special out there that you can't ask questions about it. I think that's healthy.
All right, great. I got to get with the program.
Yeah, get with the program.
I got to keep things moving. Yeah. We've got an audience out there waiting to get thousands. Questions. Yeah. So most of the questions we're going to be asking today are yours. So if you have a question, just hit the Q&A button. We're joined today by City Hall reporter Megan Rodriguez. Megan and I will be going through all of the questions. We'll be asking as many as we can in the next hour, and we'll ask a few of our own. The studio doors are locked from the outside, so I think we are ready to go.
Hot seat.
Right now, first question, and if you struggle with this, you are in trouble. So let's start out easy. Why are you running for mayor?
Out of an abundance of gratitude, just overwhelming gratitude. Right. I want to give back to my city. The city has given me everything. And, my family thrives. My small business that I own and operate is successful because of this city. All good things that have happened to me lead back to my having chosen San Antonio. A lot of us, we can all choose to live in any other city, but the smartest thing I ever did was choose to live here, right? And I see an incredible amount of potential after having worked in those different positions that you went through. I see that San Antonio can and should be not just one of the top 10 cities in the United States as far as size, but one of the top 10 cities as far as economic development, right? Opportunities for everybody, innovation, leisure, right? And we also are in a city that is unlike any other city in the United States in that I think we really may be the most authentic city, with New Orleans coming up a close second, right? If you really think about the great cities of the world, those are the cities that wrap their arms around their authenticity and protect it at all costs. And we're growing at breakneck speeds. We're the fastest growing city in the United States. And so I think that the next mayor needs to bring a vision, right? That mayor's vision needs to include protecting that authenticity. And the mayor's vision needs to also include a very serious conversation about those things that are challenges to us that need to be addressed. But also, I believe that the next mayor needs experience. Everybody's got great ideas, and you're going to interview a lot of other candidates, and they're going to present you with some really good ideas, and they're going to present you with visions, right? But if you can talk about vision during a job interview, but you can't talk about experience and actually having done the things that need to be done, I'm not sure that candidate you're interviewing is the right one. So I bring experience, I bring the vision, I bring the love for the city, and I bring a hunger to make sure that our authenticity, our people, our neighborhoods, our history is protected at all costs.
I want to make sure that I have a good idea of kind of what some of your policies are. When you first announced your candidacy, some of the items that you talked about were pretty just high level. You talked about wanting to have innovative solutions for reducing crime and increasing the or reducing homelessness in the city and things of that nature. So I just wanted to get a little bit of a better sense of kind of what are some of your top policies that you want to dig into if you're
So first and foremost, I think that every single policy that we need to be adopting going forward, right? Any vision for San Antonio needs to include optimism with a capital O, right? For way too long, San Antonio elected officials, and then also on the state and federal level, right? Scaring people into believing that they're terribly, that they're doing terribly, and that if and only if you hire me, will you finally reach prosperity, and that, we're not deserving of excellence, but good enough is good enough. I think that that's been the norm for prior mayoral campaigns, and we're seeing that as that kind of cynical approach to keeping people scared and despondent, and and eroding their trust in government. I think that actually is a strategy that works very well for a lot of elected officials. However, I will tell you that it's okay. And I want a mayor, and I think the city deserves a mayor that from the rooftop says, we deserve excellence. Anything less than excellence, right, is unacceptable. So excellence as it relates to economic development, right? Let's chase and let's make sure that the world knows that if you're a major headquarters, you would be foolish to not choose San Antonio. The next time an Amazon announces that we've got a global headquarters beauty pageant, then we're inviting all cities to participate. San Antonio cannot be the only city that stands up and says, accept us. We're not ready for this. We're too fat. We're too illiterate. We're too poor. We got too much diabetes and too much joblessness. We're not going to even participate. I think Castle Hills may have even participated, right? So,
but what about workforce readiness? I mean, that everything you just said. I mean, it sounds great, but it discounts the role of education and educational achievement, which is San Antonio has made a lot of progress over the past few decades, but it is still a challenge, and it is difficult to get the attention of Fortune 500 companies because of that. How do you get around that if you're talking about bringing corporate headquarters to San Antonio?
The people that didn't get that memo was Toyota. Right. And JCB and a lot of the other companies that have chosen San Antonio and have found that this despondency that we have for ourselves, right, we're just not prepared enough. We're not literate enough. We're not educated enough. Really is
about headquarters offices or large operations.
Both.
Because Toyota, as far as I know, did not move its North American headquarters to San Antonio.
No, it moved them to Plano, right? But it moved an operation of many billions of dollars in order of magnitude here. I mean, we've got thousands and thousands and thousands of people going to work down there, despite the fact that at the time we had elected officials telling everybody, oh, well, we lost AT&T, and can you blame them? Yeah. Right. And so I think that despondency at the very top levels of government trickles down and is toxic to achieving big things. So first of all, I think it's tone setting, right? We deserve excellence. We deserve excellence in policing, right? Excellence in policing means that when somebody dials 911, the response time is very low. Right. And right now we're at 6 minutes and change from when you dial 911. But that's incorrect. We're at 6 minutes and change from the moment a police officer is dispatched by the 911 dispatch people until their final destination. But we still have a lot of people reporting that it can take up to an hour sometimes for police and fire to get to the emergency. We have police and fire trucks that, you know, it's you don't have to be a rocket science to realize that bad traffic also means that police and fire trucks get there slower, right? There needs to be a conversation about, and there can be, and we deserve to set a goal for ourselves in every category. Why don't we set a goal to be the city with the fastest 911 response time in Texas? I don't think there's anything wrong with setting a goal and working our way towards that. We could set a goal to where we reduce homelessness by 10% every single year. We haven't got a goal like that, but I think goal setting is one of the most important things that private industry and other agencies do very, very well. And you work towards these goals. And I don't feel like we've got a goal. If you're uninspired by local government and state government and federal government, it's because there's no goals, right? And so the second thing, as far as hard policies, right? One is making sure that economic development from the exterior comes to San Antonio, but also economic development locally, business retention, that needs to be, with a sense of urgency, one of our top priorities, right? You cannot have a new star disappearing from San Antonio and have only the newspaper write 2 or 3 stories about it, and then everybody say, oh, well, we lost New Star, right? We should have been fighting harder from the beginning, right, to make sure that a new star leaving wasn't even a possibility, right? We've got large employers in San Antonio who need to be sat down with every single month and asked, what can we do to you? I'm sorry, do for you, right? That you need in order to succeed, right? But in order to make sure you never want to leave. 2, what do we need to do for college students who are literally looking at Dallas, Chicago, Austin, Houston as their next move out of college? What do we need to do to make sure that San Antonio is sticky here and here, right? For them to say, I'd be crazy if I left San Antonio, right? We've never had a concerted effort to retain these brains that we're just seeding to other cities. You know, the overwhelming majority of Trinity University students leave without ever getting touched by anybody in San Antonio and reminded, we love you, you should stay here. Here's the consideration. Here's some things to consider about staying in San Antonio. Domestic violence is a economic development, a criminal law crisis, a human crisis. It touches everything. 1 in 3 women in San Antonio have or will have a domestic violence story to tell. And simply dedicating $250,000, $500,000 to a domestic violence shelter, that's not going to solve the problem, right? Especially when the city is growing at such a fast clip. And so it is okay to have difficult conversations. It's okay to demand excellence. And it's also okay to call things out when they're not okay, right? And that's the other thing that we've got to do at City Hall. Whenever we see mediocrity being passed off as really good policy, I think a mayor has the obligation to say, no, we deserve better than that, right? And I'm not sure you've been seeing that in a long time. I think Ron Nirenberg is very conscientious. I think he's very smart. I think he's a very aggressive, ambitious mayor. But I don't think that we've been seeing coming out of City Hall for the past 20 years, in my opinion, right, is what you see from other major cities who are informed by optimism and knowing that they deserve only excellence and nothing less.
Well, given that, it seems like it would be the responsibility of a mayoral candidate to call out mediocrity if he or she sees it. Do you see any, looking at Ron Nirenberg's record over the last 7 years, any mediocrity, anything he did that he shouldn't have, or anything he did that was maybe well-intentioned but could have been done better?
Bicycle lanes on Avenue B. I'm serious, right? Ron and I have talked about this in the past, right?
You should probably give us some background.
Yeah, I remember back then there was a debate about, how many lanes Broadway was going to, have for vehicles, whether or not we were going to install bike lanes from one end to the other. There's the engineers and some other folks came back and said, hey, we're going to divert those bike lanes from Broadway onto Avenue B and then back onto Broadway. And it became this tempest in a teapot, right? That dominated so much of our time. And I believe that a mayor needs to be up here, right? And the placement of a bike lane is small ball, right? And I think, and I wish that Ron hadn't gotten himself sucked into that, because that was energy wasted, right? Political capital wasted, and it was all for naught, right? I mean, at the end of the day, Bruce Bugg and the governor decided that, they're going to take their shiny ball Broadway home and, do whatever it is they want to do with it, as opposed to letting us put bike lanes on it. Sometimes we as elected officials get sucked into the small things when we need to be remembering that our jobs aren't the day-to-day granular operations of City Hall, but our job is policy making, right? And to look at the big picture and to lead a city forward. I'd like to be the mayor that reminds everybody that small ball gets us small ball results, right? And we need to set very ambitious goals and reach for them, right? And, ACCD talks in terms of, Mike Flores talks in terms of his moonshot, right? And making ACCD the best community college district on the planet, right? And he's achieved it by setting very, very high standards and by accepting nothing less than a team of people who are, reaching for the same goal he set, right? And I think that when city council, devolves into fights about the little stuff, right? Because you may be able to tweet about it that one particular day. I don't think we serve anybody's greater interests, right? And so I think City Hall needs to think big. And I'll tell you, if we don't think big, there's other cities that are doing it. And they'll be happy to take on the big wins that we're letting slip through our fingers sometimes.
All right, let me jump to our first viewer's question.
Yeah.
What would you do differently as mayor to stop excluding residents with disabilities from the city's own workforce and stop robbing residents with disabilities of representation so that the tax burden stops falling disproportionately higher on them?
I mean, talk about a first question out of the game. So thank you for that question. A lot of folks who are disabled go unseen and unheard, right? And I think that's just the tale as old as time. It's more comfortable for people who aren't disabled just to go about their day and not worry, right? But let's remember, there but for the grace of God go I, right? Additionally, it's really important to remember that just because you have limitations on your mobility doesn't mean you have limitations on your intellect or your ability, right, to do amazing things. And so one of the things that God's blessed me with, right, is having given me the opportunities to become a labor and employment lawyer, right, and work really, really hard on behalf of the rights of disabled employees who are not treated with the dignity and with the respect that they merit. People who are discriminated against, who aren't given opportunities, people who are, passed over just because nobody takes them as seriously as they should. I'll remind everybody that whether you like them or not, right, this state is led by a governor in a wheelchair. Right. Whether you like it or not, whether you liked him or not, one of the Roosevelt brothers was in a wheelchair. Right. And there are plenty of people out there who would run, to forgive the pun, but run circles around everybody else in their wheelchairs. Right. And I have family members who are disabled, who are achieving some amazing things in college and in their professional careers. And so let nobody look upon disabled people and feel sorry for them. Instead, we need to correct the wrongs that we have made for too long, which is passing them over. To that end, I will tell you that buildings that are built with just ADA as the bare minimum, right? ADA compliance is the bare minimum. That's not good enough, right? We need buildings that are super inclusive, which is why Gordon Hartman is a partner of ours at the city, educating us on how to make an airport the most inclusive airport. With little things, right? With rooms that are for people that have sensory, issues, where they get too stimulated. They need a quiet place in order to not, devolve and spin into, crisis right there at your airport. You need adult changing stations, right, at in the restrooms. And we're doing that. We're updating all of our parks. We're updating, our airport and other public facilities. And I'm seeing other private buildings now doing that. And they're doing that because they know it's the right thing. As far as taxation is concerned, I'll remind everybody that we live in a state where all tax issues are handled by the state. And so the city's ability to decide who gets taxed more and who gets taxed less is non-existent, right? That's not within our purview. However, it is within our purview to advocate, right? And I'm the chairman of the Intergovernment Relations Committee for the city. In other words, my job, I'm the pointy end of the stick at City Hall as far as telling San Antonio's story in DC and Austin, and making sure that our people are not forgotten up there and that they're kept in mind when policy is crafted. Right now, we're in the midst of designing our next legislative agenda. And whoever asked that question, I invite you to call me so we can figure out whether or not what you want to see changed makes it into our legislative agenda that we can go all together and advocate. And I'll take you to go testify, viewer, because that's what we need is more voices at the table.
And I'd point out also that getting down to the very basics, city sidewalks. I mean, many of them are impassable and not accessible to anybody in a wheelchair.
Right.
So
you're not wrong. You need at least 6 feet in order to, call a sidewalk accessible for people inside in wheelchairs. And many of our sidewalks around San Antonio aren't there yet, right? And so there's a lot of work to be done. But if you do it methodically and intentionally, you will get there, right? But I think the other thing we do is sometimes we get so caught up in the big shiny stuff that we don't call attention to the good work that we're doing on the simple stuff like the sidewalks, right? I'll tell you, we pour thousands and thousands and thousands of square feet of cement every year, rehabilitating and building out sidewalks so that they are accessible. And it's a slow grind, but we're doing it.
I mean, I think the root of a lot of this question, though, is kind of what will you do differently, though? And you've named a lot of things that are kind of already rolling. So I guess what would you do differently?
Well, the first thing we need to do is I think we need to, call attention to the fact that there is a commission that the city created for the purpose of discussing disability rights and disability, not just rights, but expectations and needs, right? But second, I think each council member has an obligation to really look at the makeup of their boards and commissions and ask ourselves, should disabled folks only be relegated to serving on the Commission for Disability Rights, right? Or should we appoint them to also the Board of Trustees for VIA, Brooks, the Port, right? Our LGBTQ Commission, right? Our Commission on Elderly Affairs. And so I think that this group of folks has also been disenfranchised by being ignored by government. And so one of the things I would like to see in the future is more staffers at City Hall be members of this community, right? Do you know that right now there's nobody at City Hall who's blind? Nobody, right? And yet blind folks rely almost exclusively for their transportation purposes on public transportation, right? But we don't have them within the building to help us inform, policy. I think that we need to be more intentional about bringing in all those voices to the table. Does that make sense? Yeah.
All right. What? I feel bad for you. What do you want to talk about? Question. What exactly are your policies to eradicate homelessness, economic disparity, and bring about job creation?
Yeah. So first of all, I'll tell you, if people don't have the skills to get jobs, they won't get jobs. Mm-hmm. That's not a, an intellectual big leap and, to take, right? Everybody knows that. Right now, there is a lot of San Antonians out there who are unskilled, right? And who want those skills, but they can't get them because they don't have IDs, right? They've been homeless for so long. They don't have a driver's license. They don't even know their social security number. They have no place to take a shower. right? Imagine going and getting trying to get through a job interview after not having taken a shower for months, right? They've got no dental care. Imagine a job interview, and what are your chances if, half your teeth are missing, right? If your hair is not combed. And so there's some very, very simple, small things that we have been addressing through Ready to Work, which I have a feeling you're going to want to talk about.
Oh, yeah.
But also, through making sure that we've got locations around town where people can actually take those showers. We're making sure that our friends at UT Health, this budget, we've been advocating for increased funding for dental care for them, taking care of just basic Maslow's human needs, right? The second thing is that we need to also ask the question, why are you homeless to begin with, right? And address those root causes, right? Oftentimes, those root causes are instability at home. Right. We know that domestic violence oftentimes pushes victims into homelessness, right? Because they just need to escape from their oppressors, right? We know that dysfunction at home, mental health crises at home, destabilizes a family, prevents people from going to jobs, and then because they can't pay their bills, they're suddenly homeless. We know that 47% of San Antonians are renters and that they can be evicted within 30 days, right? Whereas we have fewer and fewer homeowners, right, as a percentage of San Antonians every year. So this is one of the most complex problems. But the first problem is that you got to approach it with compassion and with dignity. When we talk about homeless men and women, we leave out the words men and women. We call them homeless, right? It's really easy to treat them in the abstract when we're talking about them as if they were anything other than human beings in crisis and in need of help, right? Mm-hmm. So when I talk to homeowners associations, you know what they tell me? Councilman, I just don't want to see them anymore. I want them arrested and, taken away. Well, there's a word for that. It's called kidnapping. You can't just go grab people because you don't want to see them anymore, right? I understand the frustrations of neighborhoods because this phenomenon is now front and center for them where it never used to exist in their neighborhoods. But what we need is a very scientific, methodical approach with goals. Do you know that we have a point and count every year, right? Where we go out, we count the number of homeless people, and we report to everybody, this is how many homeless people we have. But what we don't have is a goal where we work towards reducing the number every single year by a certain percentage. And whether we reach that goal or not is less important than striving towards it, right? Because when you've got intentionality behind it, you actually achieve something, right? Mm-hmm. The other thing is, do not discount the importance. And everybody out there needs to be really hyper aware that having UT Health and UTSA join forces and becoming one huge educational juggernaut in our city is going to have a direct impact on our ability to get people jobs, right? And our ability to get people off the streets. Even if those people on the streets don't access those opportunities to get skills, the people we're training there are going to be new social workers, new doctors, new public health officials who are going to be able to hit the streets, right? And help these folks with the services that they need. Lastly, you cannot expect people to get out of homelessness unless there's somewhere for them to live. Right. And the work that we've been doing, we need to double down, maybe triple down, right, on permanent supportive housing and even temporary housing so that people can get out, get out of homelessness, get into a safe, clean, dignified place, take a shower, get some clean clothes, leave their stuff behind safe and locked in a room so that they can go apply for a job. Right now, that is impossible for a lot of people just because they don't have a safe, dry, clean, dignified place where they can leave their kids for, a day while they go hunting for a job. We need to remove a lot of those obstacles. And the other thing too is we're not talking to homeless people, right? Yeah, I'm talking to you. I'm talking to you. We talked to the Chambers. We talked to Trish DeBerry. We talked to, Centro. We talked to a whole bunch of other folks, except we don't ask the homeless folks. We don't bring them to City Hall and say, what can we do for you, customer? What would help? And so we've got a commission for everything. We've got a commission for elderly affairs, for, a domestic violence. By the way,
have you done that?
Pardon me?
Have you done that? I go out
regularly to homeless encampments to speak to the men and women on the streets, help clean up those homeless encampments. I go out with a VA, with our homeless navigators, with social workers, with SAPD to offer them services. Sometimes I'll see homeless men and women on the streets and I'll pick them up and drop them off at a gas station so that they can get some shade and a cold drink, right? I mean, this doesn't happen unless all San Antonians get involved and see human beings as opposed to nuisances walking around.
Well, you'd mentioned neighborhoods, neighborhood associations, really just not wanting to see homeless people in their communities. Just very simple.
Right.
And I think that kind of informs the city's policy of pretty aggressively clearing homeless encampments. Is that something you support?
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, the target numbers increase pretty steadily year to year of the number of encampments cleared out. Does it do any good?
Yeah. So first of all, doing nothing will get you nothing, right? I've said that before. Yeah. What we've seen at encampments is that these are the places where people are, finding shelter, but we're also seeing that they're starting bonfires, right? There's evidence of bonfires at most of these encampments. And those are along wooden fences behind neighborhoods in empty lots full of brush and trees. I've had a restaurant in my district, Fujiya on Wurzbach, burned to the ground because they started bonfires inside the restaurant. We had a big neighborhood threatened with a fire that almost got out of control on Fredericksburg. This is a story that we're seeing all over San Antonio. And so it is a public safety problem for the people living in the nearby. And also it is a health problem for the people who are living in encampments, right? Because we also go there and we find feces and, lots of different evidence of dangerous drug use, a lot of metal shards of, and scrap metal around, and just a very dangerous place to begin with. Two things can happen at once, Greg. One, we can be compassionate and wrap these folks in services and make sure that we treat them like the human beings they are. And two, we can enforce rules, right? And there is a very, very simple set of rules that I think are perfectly reasonable. You can't start bonfires next to my house, right? Rule number one, right? Yeah. You can't have hypodermic needles strewn around the ground, especially in the place where my kids have to cross the street to go to school, right? You can't have stolen bicycles and stolen shopping carts, stuffed under rain culverts under the highway. Those things need to be there should be no tolerance for breaking those laws. At the same time, there's a way to enforce that with justice and compassion being the principles that inform the enforcement. Right.
I mean, just to put some numbers to what we're talking about here, the city had a goal this year, fiscal year 24, which we're getting ready to wrap up here now very soon, of clearing out 700 encampments or conducting 700 encampment sweeps, I should say, because a lot of those are repeats, but we're closer to like the 1,200 number. Right. And the city has a proposal right now to bump that up even to
50.
So I'm curious because, like I said, a lot of those are repeats. There's 32 sites that the city has right now that just kind of get tallied in that count over and over and over again. So, I mean, I know that you've talked about how something needs to be happening here, but is this really the solution if we're having city folks go out to the same 32 sites over and over and over again?
The alternative is Eugene, Oregon, Portland, and Seattle, right? So I spent a summer up there 2 years ago with my kids. And that is a city where they said, you know what, let's just not clean up the encampments. And I don't know what their strategy was. Those cities look like war zones. And I wish I wasn't hyperbolizing. They look like war zones, right? Every underpass is an encampment. If it's not an encampment, it's a landfill. I saw the same thing happen in Detroit, where Detroit actually just didn't have the money to be able to do what we're trying to do here, which is just keep up with the trash and keep up with the men and women who are outside creating a lot of this this refuse that needs to be cleaned up. And so again, I go back to, and I know that it's becoming the refrain here, but if we didn't do that, what would the alternative be? Not clean up these camps, right? And you can't force people to not sleep outside. If you have no home, they're going to sleep outside, right? And which is why we have to put our pedal to the metal on building shelter for them, right? But I believe that the more shelter we build for them and the less attractive we make camping outside, you will eventually push a lot of these human beings into the arms of these agencies who just are offering, please come to us. And if you come to us, right, Salvation Army, Goodwill, Haven for Hope, the domestic violence shelters, if you come to us, try us out one time. time, you're going to discover that this is the place you need to be, right? And that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to get folks to try it out one time. Give these shelters and give these agencies a taste test. You just might benefit from it. And there's going to be a lot of folks who just don't want it, right? When I go out there and I talk to homeless men and women, some of them are just like, look, I like being outside, right? I want to be able to panhandle out here, right? It feeds my addiction, right? Like, sorry, not sorry, right? I don't want to go to Haven for Hope because I can't get what I need over at Haven for Hope. And what I need is, a little heroin every day, or a little meth, or a little fentanyl, right? And they're brutally honest with me, and they're not wrong, right? These are folks who are in the grips of these very, very nasty addictions, who feed their addictions by being out there, right? But that's not all of them. We've got people who are homeless because they don't possess the coherence, right, and the mental ability to do those things that we take for granted, right? Which is just to take care of ourselves and relate to other human beings, right? So, again, Megan, it's not a binary choice, right? It's not do nothing or clean up all the encampments, right? It's clean up all the encampments while layering services upon services upon services.
Let's take a half turn to Ready to Work. You mentioned it a few minutes ago. This is the $200+ million city job training program. It's funded by an increase in the sales tax that voters approved in the very pit of the pandemic, right, in 2020. You started out as a very strong, I think, proponent of the program. Became less so over time. In January, I think you were quoted as saying, I can tell you that the CEOs that I talked to don't really think it's had the meaningful impact that was promised to them.
That remains true.
And that was in January. Yeah. So how has you were 8 months on. How has your view of the program changed? And what, in your view, is wrong with it? And as mayor, how would you fix it?
Yeah.
You could always kill it.
Well, so first of all, let's remember it's a voter authorized program, right? So just throwing up our hands and saying, we're done, right? That's not allowed. It would be illegal for us to not execute on the program that the voters ordered us to execute on, right? So in good faith, I have a fiduciary duty to my voters to make sure that we do everything we can to make this program a success. 2, I don't think anybody who's honest can look at the program and say, that was a really smooth start, right? I mean, right out of the gate, there were some stumbles, right? And we have to own those. But this is an innovative new program. We'd never done it before. And so as we have progressed, I can tell you the people who are working on this are dedicated to this concept of continuous improvement, right? They're St. Antonians too. They want this to work the way all the rest of us want it to work. And they've been adapting to the market realities and adapting to the needs of future employees. I can tell you there's thousands of people in the pipeline. We're now into the 4 digits as far as people who've gotten jobs. Still not good enough, right? And which takes me back to the first comments I was making, right? Good enough should never be acceptable. So I believe that there's lots of room for improvement in this, right? And you and I can do a full hour on room for improvement on this program, but we did improve dramatically after I made those comments, because I think what they heard us loud and clear, and they said, you know what, let's try out and throw a little more weight behind these apprenticeship programs, right? Where we work with the trades. So that, because we keep talking about STEM, right? But STEM jobs aren't the jobs that built this building. Right. We're talking about people who pour concrete, welders, electricians, plumbers, journeymen. And I don't believe that we've been paying enough attention to those opportunities. I think the future of this program, this next mayor, needs to really look at the program and decide where it has worked and what hasn't, and take us in the direction of continued adaptation, right, in response to the market. I'll tell you what's coming down the pipeline. The Bipartisan Infrastructure Act that we lobbied for, right, and was passed, it's almost $1 trillion in the pipeline for public works projects, right? That is going to suck the oxygen out of the trades market. All those people that I named, all the people, the blue collar workers, those folks are going to be in high demand. And this program, Ready to Work, needs to right now, give itself an injection of vitamin B12 and really focus more on those jobs in anticipation of all that money being released so that, more highways and streets and sidewalks infrastructure can be built out. I think the future of Ready to Work is going to be much more focused on the blue collar jobs, right? And STEM is great. And we need more STEM jobs, but not to the exclusion of the jobs that aren't shiny and exciting, right?
Mm-hmm. Now, this is really interesting question from one of our anonymous attendees. The NCAA's Final Four, which I believe is next year, has delayed needed sewer repairs, and Major League Baseball's timetable has led to initial approval of a new ballpark for the San Antonio Missions without as much public deliberation as there could have been. Does city government cater too much to corporations, allowing boards of directors elsewhere to define the parameters of our city's conversation?
Yeah. So nobody voted for the new Missions baseball stadium. I was in the back room, right, where we all kind of talk and hash this out, right? Nobody said, "Hey guys, are we catering enough to corporations here? Should we cater enough more to corporations?" Those conversations never happen. It's a really convenient, way to look at the world and, validate your conspiracy theory, appetites. But the reality is that 100% of the conversation around that project was, how do we make sure that the people's baseball team stays in San Antonio? And how do we make sure that the people's baseball team is what it should be, which is a draw for the men and women of San Antonio who can't afford a front row seat at the Spurs, right? Baseball is the most grassroots sport in all of the nation. And what we know is that this is not going to be a tourist draw. This is all for the people of San Antonio so that they can come back, reclaim their downtown, right? So that we can fix a blighted area of Northwest downtown. There was really nothing there. And then also make sure that we have one more amenity that the people of San Antonio can enjoy. I know that some people look at that and say, that's just a baseball stadium. We got so many other things we need to take care of, right? And they're not wrong, but it's not just a baseball stadium. The city charter commands City Hall to look out for people's welfare, for their safety, and for their comfort, right? And great cities provide for all three. So when we pull the comfort level and making sure that people have amenities in which to not just live and work, but play, right? That, a lot of folks poo-poo the idea of, well, look, they're just focusing on the fun stuff. It's not just the fun stuff. It's what makes a city a thriving, beautiful place in which to live. And so no apologies. You will get no apologies from me for voting for the Mission Stadium. It was the right thing to do for San Antonio. As far as the NCAA and that, the pipes and the sewer controversy, man, I'll tell you right now, I've looked at that. I've talked to SAWS. I've talked to the city. All of us, stumbled on that one. That could have been executed a lot better. If you're really, seeing red and frustrated about that project, please know that I'm seeing red and frustrated about it too. Right. I know that Eric is taking this very seriously. And we can't have 125-year-old pipes underground and just hope that they don't burst during one of the biggest national events we've got. And so that was clumsy of us, and we can do better.
To go back to the missions, financing deal. Yeah. So it's entirely contingent on private development around the site. Really, that's what's going to pay for it through the Houston Street Tours. But as part of that means the raising of the sub factory, which is one of the very few affordable housing options downtown. Now, we've gotten several questions from viewers about what you would do to increase the affordable housing stock. Didn't that vote fly in the face of the city's kind of stated goal of building out more affordable housing?
Yeah. So, Molly, I'm sorry, Megan, I don't know if you've had a chance to go to the soap factory, or if you have been a chance to go to the soap factory, but it is not Shangri-La, right? It is a rundown piece of property, and we've got a lot of brand new housing stock that is very, very deeply affordable, that is more dignified, that is cleaner, that is safer, and that is kept up much better than this place has. I do think that the first iteration of the project that was published to the public had a lot of holes in it, right? And the biggest hole was the displacement of those good people who live there, and whether or not we were treating them fairly, and we weren't. And so having heard their voices, and more than anything, having heard from Cops Metro showed up and put in front of us a proposal, right? And that proposal said, you guys got to do better here. And number one on our proposal is you guys got to pay them at least $2,500 per resident. You're literally kicking them out of their house and then telling them, don't worry, we're just offering you a great place, on the other side of downtown. That's not enough. Packing up your stuff is hard. Changing your address is hard. The moving of children and all the things that you have to pay for in order to move from one place to another, that's hard. And you can't just say, but don't worry, we gave you some housing navigators. That should be good enough. It wasn't good enough. And I want to thank Cops Metro. They really delivered on holding us accountable and holding these developers accountable. And I think that the deal that we finally have in front of these constituents is a good deal. The second thing I'll remind you is that they've got a 60% turnover rate at Sept Factory, right? So 60% of the people who are living there today, had there not been a baseball deal at all, won't be there, next year, right? So this is an apartment complex where people, are constantly moving in and moving out. And what's happening is that the landlord is not signing new leases anymore, right? They've frozen, issuing new leases. And so that number of people who are living there is just going to get smaller and smaller and smaller, so that at the very end, the people who are truly displaced is going to be a much smaller universe of people who are there currently, right? And so I'm trying to bring some perspective to this conversation, but I think that at the end of the day, it was as close to a win-win as we possibly could have gotten.
Right. Now, it is pretty inexpensive to take your family to a minor league baseball game.
It is
much more expensive to take them to an NBA game.
That's right.
So if the city kind of goes ahead with the San Antonio Spurs and they decide to seek public financing for what's likely to be an arena whose cost would be over $1 billion, close to 1.4 billion is what we're told. At Hemisphere, would you support public financing to pay for it?
Yeah. So I would not support public financing where we just hand over a check and say, okay, good luck, right? I would support some kind of public participation that would provide us a clawback of that, the opportunity to claw back that money if certain targets aren't hit, right? And if the math ends up not penciling out at the end. I would also insist that, like the Mission Stadium deal, that it be contingent upon successful and profitable development, right? And then if they can't develop that out, well then, no public participation. But I'll tell you, we are so far off. This is a far away deal. And right now, the only thing that we've seen is just some very, very broad strokes. And I'll tell you right now, nothing's being negotiated. And it's not like negotiation teams are locked up in a room right now, hammering out a deal that we'll be showing you sometime soon. We're still far away from this.
Right. But say everything goes your way and you're elected mayor next May.
Yeah.
You could conceivably be talking about an agreement with the Spurs in your first term.
That's absolutely true.
Right.
You could.
Now, you're talking about provisions, what you would look for that would be beneficial to the city of San Antonio, that if the Spurs don't deliver on, you could claw back. What would those be?
So first of all, if they're not hiring local construction companies, local engineers, local architects, right, local subcontractors, I wouldn't support the program. I mean, that would be dead on arrival for me, right? So if this is going to be the stadium for the people, for the team of the people, it needs to be built by the people, right? The second thing is it needs to honor the authenticity and the history of Hemisphere, right? It can't just be another stadium, right? It needs to be the product of public participation. And there has to be a lot of members of the public all helping design what this entire campus would look like, because we're also talking about, folks, restaurants and apartments and bars and and parks and other amenities, right? And so this is not something where the Spurs are at the table and we just need to make the owners of the Spurs happy. To be honest with you, I don't work for the owners of the Spurs. I work for the people of San Antonio. And I want to make sure that, like the other great cities of the United States, we have a vibrant downtown that features these amenities, right? I'll tell you also that Laura and I were talking about it earlier. When I travel to Korea, India, Colombia, Panama, France, Germany, like I have over the past few years on these economic development trips, you know what people talk to me about? They don't talk to me about the Alamo or the Riverwalk. They talk to me about the Spurs, right? The Spurs is a major reputational asset for us that opens the door to conversations about bringing investment to San Antonio. And so this is not just a nice to have. This is a really important asset that we
But I mean, doesn't that give the Spurs tremendous bargaining power? They never have to say the word relocation because it's in the air. That fear is there. It's present.
But it's not outside the realm of possibility. I mean, just ask the LA how about the Raiders moving to Lagos.
So when it does come time to work out a deal with the city and possibly Bexar County, I mean, don't the Spurs have the upper hand? I mean, they can get more of what they want because of this implicit threat, which again, I mean, nobody's saying that they're making it. They don't have to. Because they're really, their presence here is a big deal for San Antonio. It is really the only thing that kind of puts us on the national map.
Yeah, but what they want, right? And I have a feeling that 100% of what's going to be on the list of their asks is going to be the things that San Antonians want, right? A stunning, crown jewel of a entertainment district. They're going to want, a platform with which to amplify their brand, which would bring more attention to San Antonio. They're going to want a place where we can have bigger, better events for San Antonio and attract the kind of concerts that we aren't getting here, right? And so I would push back on you and tell you that, yes, they have a tremendous amount of power in the negotiations, but the list of asks are asks that benefit their customers, which is us, right?
So what I hear you promising is Taylor Swift, right? So the next time, so you build a Spurs arena, she'll come, right?
That's it. That's it, folks. That's my platform is make San Antonio Taylor Swift town.
Safe for Taylor Swift.
Look, it's a complicated, difficult conversation for a lot of folks, and it's a long one, and it should be a long grind for us to get to the right place. But I am confident we're going to get to the right place.
I want to make sure that we talk about the budget, since that's the
most important thing we do
this week. And I know that throughout the budget discussions, it's been kind of a tougher year for a few different reasons. There's had to be some trimming for just slowing of property tax revenue. There's also the fact that the final ARPA dollars, the 6 million last ARPA dollars, are kind of being divvied out now. The thought is there's probably going to be not so much of a CPS windfall this year. There's going to
firefighters.
Yes, that was going to be my next part is firefighters got a bigger raise than usual. So that's adding to this as well. So going into, if you were to be elected, anybody who's elected is going to just have a very different outlook on the budget than they've had to have before, like ARPA being gone and potentially some of these other issues kind of rolling into the next year. So can you tell me a little bit about which things, if you were to be elected, might end up on the chopping block? Which things would you want to protect?
So first and foremost, over my dead body, will we defund or reduce funding for police and fire? Never. That's unacceptable to me. If anything, we need to increase our investment as the city grows in police and fire and ambulance services, right? The second thing I will tell you is that we cannot afford to defund or reduce the funds for what we call delegate agencies, right? So Haven for Hope, the Rape Crisis Center, some of our very, very vital nonprofits, they are delegate agency because we delegate that work to them, right? And they are our social safety net. Right? And again, the charter requires us to look out for not just safety, but people's welfare, right? And their health. And so we have an obligation to make sure that those are fully funded, right? And so knowing that those two are going to be wrapped in bubble wrap by me, right? What's left is a discussion about infrastructure and then the administrative costs, right? I think, well, let me back up and tell you, I was created in a test tube at Toyota. I started my career there, right? And I was trained by some of the most interesting problem solvers and engineers and people who are just experts the world over and recognized for efficiency, right? And squeezing as much juice out of a process as they possibly can. I think that the city, and I will make sure that we include local businesses to come in and teach us efficiency, because they do it right. And government has never been known for efficiency, but I think that if we invite the Toyotas, the JCBs, the USAs, the HEVs of the world to come and tell us, look at our budget, where do you see opportunities for us to squeeze out more efficiency and reduce waste? I think only good things can happen there, right? Because if you really look at our city council, we're not subject matter experts, none of us, right? And any of the lines of business, if you will, of this vertically integrated organization, right? Look at my city council. There isn't a single one of us who's an expert in police, bond financing, organizational development, park management, housing, right? And so we're sent up here by the people as their neighbors to come and look at something very, very complicated. And it's a $3+ billion budget, approaching $4 billion. It's a 13,000 employee organization with billions and billions and billions of dollars of assets, right? And it would be a tremendous amount of hubris on our part to think that we know, right? We, the 10 council members and a mayor, know how to do this, and that we don't need the input of subject matter experts in efficiency like those companies I just listed. So I think the first thing I would do is bring them in, right? The second thing that I think we need to do with budgeting is I really like Mark White's idea of zero-based budgeting. I think that it's more than an academic exercise, Megan. I think that if we start from zero, right, every 5 years or every 7 years, we start from zero and then make sure to build the budget dollar by dollar by dollar, we will discover inefficiencies, we'll discover redundancies, and we'll be able to redirect those funds to other places where they need to be deployed. I think that matching our spending also with what the county is doing. I don't think we talk to the county enough, right? The county is a very powerful force in San Antonio. They've got a very important budget. And I'll tell you, the overwhelming majority of their constituents live within the city, right? And so we need to have a conversation about the county and their fair share, right, of picking up the cost for a lot of these things. Like, there's been a conversation lately about whether or not they ought to be kicking in more for the library, right? I mean, all of their constituencies are using the library services, and the county's not paying its fair share, and they should, right? And so I think the next mayor needs to go in there and do some arm twisting, right? And making sure that they are at the table and they realize that they have an obligation, but also it's an opportunity for them, right, to participate in more things and to be our better partners with us. Anyway, you just got a Manny Peláez special. You asked me a great simple question and I gave you a long answer.
It was just short of a filibuster.
That's right. That's right.
So this will be, unfortunately, we have time for one more question.
All right, make it a good one. Make it a good one.
This is a really good one.
Yeah.
From one of our viewers. Why do San Antonio construction projects never end? And
it seems that way. Right?
And it does seem that way. Yeah. And you can address that. And why are basic convenience and safety measures for pedestrians, which are standard in other cities, so sorely lacking in San Antonio?
Yeah. So first of all, ladies and gentlemen, if you drove on a street to work today where there isn't construction on it, that's because that project ended, right? It was built at one point and it ended, right? All projects do come to an end. It is tremendously inconvenient to folks. And sometimes these projects take such a long time that we feel like, and I've heard folks, that street's been under construction for 20 years. I'm like, really? Has it? Right? It hasn't been 20 years. I know it feels like it. The second thing I'll remind you is that much of the construction around San Antonio is text dot construction on our highways, right? And so 1604, 35, the I-10 interchange, all that, we get the nasty calls whenever there's, stoppages right there. Construction on Bandera, some of, Northwest Military, folks need, even Broadway, right? Well, these are not city projects, right? Mm-hmm. Some of them are county projects too. Some of them are SAWS projects. Some of them are CPS projects, and a lot of them are city projects. The biggest frustration that we've been getting is around the projects in and around downtown, right? Mm-hmm. That's incredibly difficult for people who just want to get in and out of downtown without the mess. These projects, because we have a historic downtown, require a lot of front-end engineering. They require a lot of design. You cannot lay a single inch of asphalt or pour any concrete without TCEQ coming in and saying, okay, that's good, that's not good. And I recognize, right, that all of us San Antonians who have a driver's license, we are subject matter experts in traffic management and building roads, and then we're engineers by virtue of having driver's license. But the reality is that I used to think that these should be much simpler. And then I'm serving on city council for 8 years, and I realized that they are incredibly complex. Where we went wrong was many years ago. We all approved a lot of bond projects and said, let's go build them, right? All at one time. Right. And they're getting all built at one time right now. I don't think that we were smart in phasing those or sequencing them.
But how do you mitigate that? Or are you just saying the status quo is okay? We're just going to have to live with it until these projects are done, and we'll do better next time.
Of course, it's not okay, right? Okay. And so one of the things that we did in my district, for example, is we had a road, I think it was Hebner, that was under construction, and they closed both lanes. Oh, and I was kicking and screaming. And finally, after the councilman threw his hissy fit, right, what we ended up getting was Public Works to say, all right. We'll just do one lane at a time, right? And so sometimes it requires a squeaky wheel, right, to get the attention of Public Works. But if folks aren't speaking up, Public Works doesn't know how upset you are. And I'll tell you, folks, tweeting about it, right, and putting it on Nextdoor is not the same as calling a city council office or calling Public Works and screaming your head off about, your dissatisfaction. And so this is, at the end of the day, pardon our dust. All we're trying to do is make San Antonio safer, right, and easier to get around. And to get there, there is going to be a lot of pain. I will never apologize, right, for the people who work at City Hall, right, and the men and women who wear the orange and yellow bright vests on the side of the streets. Please remember, those are San Antonians too. They want the exact same thing the rest of us want. They want less traffic. They want clean parks. They want safe streets. And so there is no shadowy cabal of engineers and builders out there trying to ruin your life and dragging their feet. That's not what's happening. These projects are just complicated. And lastly, I know people are sick and tired of hearing it, but COVID really was a very difficult moment. And it still has ripple effects in the construction industry that we're still feeling. And a lot of those projects that were delayed, were delayed, and we're still dealing with those delays, but we're not going to not finish these projects. And so I hate to say it, Greg, but yes, a lot of this pain, in some instances, it's going to get worse before it gets better. But I promise you folks, it's going to get better.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. We will leave it at that. Thank you very much, Councilman Peláez.
Thank you. You guys did a great job interviewing me. It was a pleasure. Feel free to do it often.
And thank you for watching. Have a good day.